Before we start, I want to say that only 1% of you are subscribed. Please subscribe because when we reach 1,000 subscribers, I will post a special video for you. John briskly walked through the corridors of the Galactic Council's flagship, his boots clicking against the metallic floor with each step. The vastness of the ship was overwhelming, with corridors stretching like the arteries of some great leviathan, each pulsing with the life of countless beings from across the stars. As he turned a corner, he nearly bumped into a tall, thin figure draped in shimmering garments. The figure steadied John with a slender hand. "Apologies, human," the alien said, its voice a melodic chime that resonated slightly in the air. "No harm done," John replied, catching his balance. "I'm John, here for the cultural exchange presentation." "Ah, you're the human representative." "I'm Zelnari from Theta Cygni. I look forward to learning about your species." The alien's eyes, wide and unblinking, sparkled with genuine curiosity. John smiled, appreciating the polite interest. "And I'm equally curious about yours. Shall we walk together? I find this ship a maze." Delighted, Zelnari chimed, and they started down the corridor side by side. "So, what brings a human like you to the Council?" "It's rare to see one of your kind so far from Earth," Zelnari inquired, glancing down at John with an expression that seemed to convey a friendly smile. "I'm here to discuss human culture, among other things." "It seems we're quite the anomaly in terms of reproduction and social connections," John explained, adjusting his briefcase. "Indeed, that is a topic of much fascination," Zelnari replied. "My species reproduces through spores, quite efficient but nowhere near as intricate as yours, I understand." The corridor opened into a bustling atrium where beings of various forms mingled. John noticed a group of delegates who resembled large, walking corals, communicating through subtle color changes. It's fascinating to see so many different forms of life, each with its own unique methods of living and reproducing. Exactly why these conferences are crucial, a new voice joined in. They turned to see a robust, four-armed Ganeshan, his tusks intricately carved. "I'm Guro from Ganesh Prime. Couldn't help but overhear." "Reproduction, you say? That's always an eye-engaging topic at these gatherings." John laughed, extending his hand. "John?" "And yes, it seems to catch everyone's interest." Goro's upper right hand shook John's firmly. "Well, human, you'll find no shortage of curious ears here. Or other sensory organs, depending on the audience," he joked, his four eyes twinkling with amusement. As they made their way through the crowd, John's nerves began to settle. The trio exchanged details of their homeworlds, each story adding to a tapestry of galactic life so varied it could fill libraries. "I must prepare for my session, but let's reconvene afterward," Zelnari suggested as they neared a large door marked with the insignia of the Galactic Council. "Agreed. I'm eager to hear what everyone thinks of human relationships and emotions," John said, feeling the weight of his mission. It's one thing to study these concepts in a lab or through telescopes. It's another to share them face to face. Goro clapped John on the back with a hearty laugh. "Well, human, prepare to be the star of the show. Your subject matter is more gripping than you might expect." As they parted ways, John felt a surge of anticipation. This was his moment to shine a light on humanity, to show the galaxy not just how humans lived, but how they loved. He straightened his jacket and entered the council chamber, ready to start the dialogue that might bridge worlds. John stood behind the podium in the vast council chamber, gazing out over a sea of varied life forms. The soft hum of interspecies chatter filled the air as everyone settled into their seats, their attention turning towards him. He cleared his throat, the microphone amplifying the sound throughout the room. "Ladies, gentlemen, and esteemed beings of the Galactic Council," John began, his voice steady despite the butterflies in his stomach. "I am profoundly grateful for the opportunity to discuss a topic today that is close to every human's heart, our culture, specifically how we experience and celebrate life through our unique method of reproduction." From the corner of his eye, he noticed Goro and Zelnari taking their seats in the front row, offering him encouraging nods. "As many of you might know, humans are biologically and emotionally complex," John continued. "We form deep emotional connections, which play a significant role in our reproduction, not merely for the purpose of procreation, but as an expression of love and partnership." A murmur rippled through the crowd. An Arcturian delegate raised a hand, its skin shimmering with a metallic sheen. "Excuse me, John, but could you elaborate on what you mean by emotional connections?" John smiled, appreciative of the interruption. "Certainly. For humans, emotional connections mean bonds formed based on feelings. These can range from love and friendship to deeper, romantic ties that often lead to forming families. Interesting, another voice chimed in, belonging to a delegate from Vesperia. In Vesperian culture, relationships are primarily contractual. Could you describe how these emotions influence your reproductive process? Absolutely, John replied. Human relationships often start with attraction, which can develop into deeper feelings like love. These emotions are not just psychological, but have physiological impacts as well, influencing our choices and behaviors, including choosing a partner with whom to reproduce. A tfeoin, a bird-like species known for their quick minds, fluttered its wings excitedly. Is this process not highly inefficient? Our species optimizes reproductive partnerships based on genetic compatibility alone. John chuckled lightly. It might seem inefficient, but it's also what makes human life rich and varied. Our emotional bonds drive diversity and personal fulfillment. The chamber buzzed with whispered conversations as delegates digested his words. John took the opportunity to step away from the podium, walking closer to the audience. "Let me show you something," he said, signaling to the technician. The screen behind him lit up with images of human families, couples, and friends, showcasing their interactions filled with joy and affection. These images represent more than just biological reproduction. They represent the human spirit, our joys, our challenges, and our triumphs through shared love and life, John explained, his voice growing more passionate. The Signian delegate, covered in luminescent scales, tilted its head. "Do you imply that these emotional experiences are essential to your reproductive success?" "In a way, yes," John answered. "They don't just ensure the continuation of our species, but enrich our lives, making the journey worthwhile." As the presentation drew to a close, John invited more questions, and hands shot up across the room. The session stretched on, filled with lively discussion and debate, far surpassing its allotted time. Delegates were not only intrigued by the concept of love influencing reproduction, but were deeply fascinated by the human ability to intertwine life, love, and legacy so profoundly. As the crowd eventually dispersed, John, Gro, and Zelnari regrouped, their faces animated with the thrill of successful exchange. "That went better than I expected," John admitted, relief washing over him. Goro clapped him on the shoulder. "You didn't just present, John. You engaged them, made them think. That's what this council needs more of." Zelnari agreed, its voice melodious with excitement. "You have indeed opened a door, John. They see us as more than just biological beings now. They see us as creatures of emotion." As they left the chamber together, John felt a camaraderie with his new friends, a sense of accomplishment, and the burgeoning excitement of what was yet to come. As the next day dawned, John found himself at a smaller, more informal gathering organized by the council to allow deeper discussions on topics that had piqued interest. Seated around a large oval table were delegates from various systems, all buzzing about the previous day's revelations regarding human reproduction. John, sipping on a steaming cup of what the galactic menu described as a calming brew, prepared to dive deeper into human intimacy. Goro, who had taken the role of an unofficial aide, leaned over and whispered, "You've certainly stirred the pot, my friend. They're not going to let you off easy today." Across from them, a new face, a delegate named Harold from the planet Lysathea, seemed particularly eager. "John," Harold began, his tone both curious and skeptical, "you spoke of emotions and love influencing reproduction. How often do humans engage in this process? The concept is quite alien to us." John placed his cup down, his mind organizing thoughts into coherent explanations. "Well, Harold, it varies widely among individuals. For some, it might be very frequent, while for others, it could be less so. It all depends on personal circumstances, emotional states, and mutual consent between partners." A tfeoin from the back piped up, "And this frequency doesn't affect your population adversely?" "Our calculations suggest it could lead to overpopulation quickly." "That's a valid concern," John conceded. "However, humans have developed various methods of managing reproduction responsibly. It's not just about procreation, but about the quality of life and emotional fulfillment." The room nodded, murmurs of understanding rippling through. Zelnari then asked, "Could you perhaps expand on how these emotional connections are formed? Is there a specific process?" John chuckled. "It's not quite as procedural as it might be for other species. It often starts with something as simple as a conversation or a shared experience. Over time, these interactions can build into deeper feelings." "Curious," Goro suggested, "why don't we simulate a typical human interaction that might lead to such a connection?" It could provide practical insights. That's an excellent idea. John agreed, standing up. Let's say Harold and I meet for the first time at a conference, much like this one. We might start with a handshake. John extended his hand to Harold, who mimicked the action awkwardly. The room watched intently as John guided the interaction. As we shake hands, John narrated, we make eye contact, smile, and perhaps exchange pleasantries. Nice to meet you, Harold. What brings you to this conference? Harold, catching on, replied, I am here to learn about other cultures, particularly human emotions and relationships. Then, I might say, that's fascinating. I have a presentation on human emotional connections. Maybe you'll find it interesting. And just like that, we have a starting point for a deeper conversation, John explained, breaking the handshake. The delegates murmured, impressed with the simplicity yet effectiveness of such interactions. And such exchanges can lead to emotional connections. A delegate from Cygnus asked. Exactly, John affirmed. Over time, and with more shared experiences, these connections can grow. They might lead to friendship, love, or even partnerships, both personal and professional. The room seemed to pulse with a new understanding, and John felt a wave of satisfaction knowing he was bridging a gap between vastly different cultures. As the session wrapped up, the delegates were more animated than before, discussing among themselves in their native tongues and gestures. Goro turned to John with a grin. You may have just started a revolution in interstellar relationships, John. Laughing, John gathered his notes. Let's hope it's the kind that brings us closer together, not just as allies, but as friends. With that, the group dispersed, each delegate taking with them a new perspective on human intimacy and its profound impact on life, a topic that, just days ago, had been as foreign as the stars they hailed from. The next session convened in a circular lounge designed for more intimate dialogue. The room buzzed with the soft murmur of various languages as delegates slowly trickled in from across the galaxy. John sat on a plush seat shaped oddly like a beanbag, designed to accommodate species of all sizes. Goro and Zelnari joined him, with Harold and a few others gathering around in a semicircle. Harold began, adjusting his translator device to better capture nuances. Your last discussion opened a lot of eyes and other sensory organs. The group chuckled, easing into the conversation. I have a question about the emotional aspects of human reproduction. How do these emotions affect the physical process? John nodded, appreciating the depth of the question. Emotions can greatly enhance the physical experience. They intensify our physical responses, making the connection stronger and more meaningful. Goro leaned forward, his four eyes reflecting a keen interest. Could you describe how these connections might start? What are the initial steps? Of course, John replied. Let's imagine two humans meeting at a social event. It often starts with visual contact, followed by verbal communication. They might share personal interests, laugh together, and feel a mutual attraction. Zelnari tilted his head, intrigued. Is this attraction instantaneous, or does it develop over time? It can be both, John explained. Sometimes people feel a spark right away. Other times, attraction grows as they get to know each other better. It's the shared experiences that build this bond. A new voice joined a discussion, Vorl, a delegate from a water-based planet. And once this bond is formed, what happens? How do they express this growing attraction? John thought for a moment, then responded, physical touch becomes important. They might start with something simple like holding hands or a light touch on the arm. These gestures are small but significant. Curious, Vorl continued, and these touches, you mentioned they are infused with emotions. How do these emotions manifest physically? Well, John started, when humans touch someone they care about, it can trigger a cascade of biological responses, increased heart rate, the release of certain hormones like oxytocin, which is often called the love hormone. The group listened intently, the scientific explanation bridging the gap between human emotion and physical biology. Could you demonstrate a simple gesture that might signify affection? Harold asked, his tone respectful yet curious. John smiled, looking around the group. Sure. Goro, may I? He motioned towards Goro's hand. Goro extended his arm, and John took his hand gently, demonstrating a soft squeeze. This is a common gesture among friends or partners. It's comforting and expresses support. As he released Goro's hand, the room was silent, absorbing every detail. Zelnari then spoke. This is fascinating. In our culture, touch is not common due to our sensory makeup. Observing this, I realize how much emotion is communicated non-verbally among humans. Yes, much of our communication is non-verbal, John agreed. These subtleties can deeply enhance the relationship, adding layers of understanding and empathy between individuals. As the session neared its end, the atmosphere was one of mutual respect and fascination. Delegates were scribbling notes, some mimicking the hand gesture amongst themselves, exploring the unfamiliar territory of tactile communication. "Thank you, John," Vorel said as the group began to disperse. "You've given us a lot to think about." The universality of emotion, even expressed so differently across our species, is quite a revelation. John packed up his materials, heartened by the connections being formed not just on a diplomatic level, but on a personal one as well. As he left the room with Goro and Zelnari, they shared a look of accomplishment and a nod of understanding, ready to explore further in the sessions to come. Later that day, John found himself walking beside Zelnari along a corridor lined with windows that offered a view of the star-speckled void outside. Their conversation from earlier had sparked an intriguing idea in Zelnari's mind, and the aliens seemed eager to discuss it further in a less formal setting. "John, your explanations about human emotions and physical touch were truly enlightening," Zelnari began, its voice echoing slightly in the quiet of the hallway. "I find myself curious about the broader implications of such interactions on personal development and societal structure." John was intrigued. "That's an interesting point, Zelnari. In humans, these interactions aren't just about personal connections. They influence our entire social fabric. They're foundational to building trust and cooperation within communities." Zelnari nodded, the lights reflecting off its translucent skin. "In my culture, we communicate and learn through shared consciousness, which lacks the physical and emotional components of human interactions. I wonder, could there be a way to simulate your forms of communication among my people? Perhaps it could introduce a new dimension to our interactions." "That sounds like a fascinating project," John replied, genuinely interested. "Perhaps we could set up an exchange program. We could start by sharing different methods of communication and learning from each other's experiences." Zelnari stopped walking, turning to face John fully. "Would you be willing to help me design such a program? I believe your insights into human emotions would be invaluable." "I'd be honored," John said with a smile. "It sounds like a wonderful opportunity for both our species." They agreed to meet later in one of the ship's conference rooms to begin outlining their ideas. As they parted ways, John felt a surge of excitement at the prospect of working on such an innovative project. Later, in the conference room, John and Zelnari were joined by Goro and another human delegate, Marcus, who specialized in intercultural communication. The room was equipped with various devices and interfaces, ready to assist in their collaborative efforts. "As we think about this exchange program," Marcus began, his eyes alight with enthusiasm, "we should consider not only the exchange of ideas and communication methods, but also the environments in which these interactions occur. Context is incredibly important in human communication." "Absolutely," John agreed. "The setting, the ambience, these can all influence how messages are perceived and understood." Zelnari projected some images on the screen, showing different environments from its world: vast libraries, communal living spaces, and more. "These are places where my people gather for collective learning. We could start here, adapting these spaces to incorporate human-style interactions." Goro, who had been listening intently, chimed in. "And perhaps we could replicate some typical human settings on your planet, Zelnari. Places like coffee shops or parks where people naturally gather and interact." "That's a great idea," John said. "These are spaces where a lot of informal human interactions take place. People chat, share stories, or simply enjoy each other's company. It might be interesting to see how your people would use similar spaces." Zelnari was fascinated. "This could truly revolutionize the way we interact. But how do we begin such a transformation?" Marcus suggested starting with a pilot program. "Let's select a small group from each of our species to participate. We can monitor their interactions and make adjustments as needed before expanding the program." John nodded in agreement. "We'll need to gather a lot of data and feedback. This is uncharted territory for all of us, so it's important to be flexible and responsive to what we learn." As the meeting drew to a close, they had a clear plan in place and tasks assigned to each member of the team. John felt a deep sense of purpose as he and his colleagues stood up, ready to embark on this new venture. "Thank you, everyone," Zelnari said as they prepared to leave. "This collaboration could be the beginning of something extraordinary." John, Guro, and Marcus shared a look of mutual satisfaction. They were not just sharing knowledge, but potentially shaping the future of interstellar relations. The corridors of the Galactic Council ship felt alive with possibilities as they each headed off to prepare for the next steps. The initiative that John, Zelnari, Guro, and Marcus had set in motion was now taking a tangible form. In a specially designed area aboard the Galactic Council ship, they had created a simulation of a human park, complete with synthetic grass, benches, and even a holographic blue sky. Today, they were about to conduct their first live demonstration with a mixed group of humans and aliens from Zelnari's species. John stood with Marcus as they watched the final preparations. "Do you think they'll be able to grasp the concept of hanging out as we do on Earth?" Marcus asked, looking slightly anxious. "It's an experiment," John reassured him. "But it's about more than just understanding. It's about feeling. We've got to give them the full human experience, emotions and all." As the participants began to arrive, Guro took on the role of facilitator. "Welcome, everyone. Today, we're going to try something that's quite common on Earth. It's called relaxing in the park. Humans do this to enjoy nature and each other's company." The alien participants looked around, their eyes wide at the unfamiliar setup. Zelnari, who had been instrumental in selecting the participants from its species, guided them to sit on the benches and encouraged them to explore their surroundings. John joined one of the groups, sitting down next to an alien named Sari. "So, what do you think of our little park?" he asked, smiling. Sari, whose skin shimmered softly in the holographic sunlight, replied, "It is peaceful. On my world, we do not have many open spaces like this. We are always connected, always together mentally. This concept of physical space for relaxation is new to us. That's exactly why we're doing this," John explained. "Sometimes, just being in a peaceful environment can help ease the mind. Humans find this kind of setting helps with emotional bonding." Across the way, Guro was demonstrating the use of a frisbee. He tossed it gently to a human participant, who caught it and threw it back. The aliens watched in fascination, and soon, they were eager to join in. Marcus observed the interactions, taking notes. "Look at that," he pointed out to John. "They're communicating through play. It's a universal language." "Yes," John agreed, watching a particularly enthusiastic Sari catch the frisbee. "Play is an essential part of human culture. It teaches us about teamwork, trust, and the joy of sharing moments." As the session progressed, more spontaneous interactions began to occur. Participants shared stories about their worlds, laughed at the odd misthrow, and gradually began to relax more into the environment. After a couple of hours, the group gathered for a feedback session. Sari spoke first. "This experience, it's enlightening. I feel a lightness I have not known before. It is very different from our shared consciousness, where everything is intertwined. Here, I feel I can be just me." John nodded, pleased with the response. That's a significant aspect of human experience, celebrating individuality within a community. Zelnari added, "Observing my people interact in this setting has provided invaluable insights. This individuality, it's something we might explore further. It could lead to new ways of thinking and interacting on our world." As the participants left the park simulation, they seemed reluctant to return to the reality of the ship. The experiment had sparked something in each of them, a realization of the value of personal space and leisure. John and his team debriefed after everyone had left. "I think we're on to something," Marcus said with a smile. "Today wasn't just about demonstrating human relaxation techniques. It was about sharing our way of life. And about learning from theirs," Guro added. The exchange goes both ways. They all agreed that the next step was to refine the program based on the day's learnings and to continue these simulations, possibly introducing other human social settings. As John left the room, he felt a sense of accomplishment. They were not just teaching and learning, they were building bridges, one small interaction at a time. After several weeks of running simulations and facilitating interactions between humans and aliens, John and his team met in a quiet conference room to reflect on the progress of their cultural exchange program. The room was set up to mimic a comfortable lounge, promoting open dialogue and relaxed discussion. Marcus was already there, arranging his notes as John entered. "John, these past few weeks have been quite remarkable," Marcus began, offering John a cup of tea. "We've seen some genuine breakthroughs, especially in understanding human social nuances." John accepted the tea, nodding in agreement. "It's been more successful than I initially hoped. The participants seem to genuinely enjoy the experiences, and the feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. Goro joined them, his presence filling the room with an air of enthusiasm. I've been reviewing the data from the last session in the park simulation. It's fascinating to see how the concept of personal space has been embraced by Zelnari species. Zelnari, who had just entered, added, "Indeed, the introduction of personal space has sparked a new kind of dialogue among my people. We are exploring the balance between collective consciousness and individual experience, something we hadn't considered before." John turned to Zelnari, curious. "Has this changed the way your people interact with each other?" "It has," Zelnari confirmed. "There is a newfound respect for personal thoughts and experiences. It's a concept that's still very new to us, but it's being embraced as a valuable addition to our culture." Marcus, always the keen observer, chimed in. "This is a prime example of how cross-cultural exchanges can benefit all parties involved. We set out to share human concepts, but we're learning just as much in return." The group agreed, and conversation flowed into how these insights could be further developed. John suggested, "Perhaps we could organize a symposium here on the ship, inviting other delegations to share and learn from these experiences." "That's an excellent idea," Goro supported. "It would also give us an opportunity to showcase the success of our program to the broader council." As they discussed potential themes and participants for the symposium, camaraderie among them was palpable. They had started as representatives of their respective species, tasked with a diplomatic mission, but had grown into colleagues and friends, united by their shared work. Reflecting on this, John mentioned, "It's not just our projects that are evolving. Our own perspectives are changing. I find myself looking at human interactions through a new lens, considering angles I had never thought about before." Marcus nodded in agreement. "It's the personal connections we've made here that have truly enriched this experience. They've allowed us to understand not just the mechanics of each other's cultures, but the heart of them." As the meeting drew to a close, they outlined the next steps for organizing the symposium. John felt a deep sense of fulfillment as he looked around at his colleagues. They had started this journey with the aim of teaching and had ended up learning so much more about themselves and each other. As they left the room, Goro put an arm around John's shoulders. "You know, John, I think we've managed to do something truly special here." John smiled, looking back at the room where so much understanding had taken place. "Yes, we have, Goro. And I think the best is yet to come." The symposium was a resounding success. Representatives from various species gathered in the largest auditorium aboard the Galactic Council ship, where John, Marcus, Goro, and Zelnari were to present the findings and experiences from their cultural exchange program. The room buzzed with anticipation as the event was about to commence. John adjusted his microphone, looking out over the crowd. "Welcome, everyone. Today, we're not just sharing the results of a simple exchange program. We're celebrating the unexpected bridges that have been built between our diverse cultures." Marcus took the stage next, clicking to a slide showing diagrams and photos from the various simulations they had conducted. What started as a project to demonstrate human social behaviors has evolved into a profound journey of mutual understanding and respect. Here, you can see some of the activities that sparked significant insights among participants. Goro then shared testimonials from the participants, both human and alien, about how the experience had enriched their understanding of each other's worlds. This feedback, Goro noted, highlights the deep personal connections that have been formed, transcending the initial scope of the project. Zelnari, always eloquent, spoke last. "The concept of individuality within a collective existence, inspired by human interactions, has begun to take root among my people. It's a testament to the power of learning from each other." The audience responded with enthusiastic applause, many nodding and murmuring in agreement. The presentation concluded with an open Q&A session, where the excitement and curiosity in the room became even more palpable. As the symposium wrapped up, the team gathered for a private moment backstage. Jean looked at his friends, a mix of pride and nostalgia coloring his tone. "I can't believe it's nearly time to go back to Earth. It feels like we've started something that has its own life now." Marcus clapped him on the back. "We did, John. But this isn't the end. It's a continuation. The relationships we've built and the programs we've started will keep evolving." Goro, ever the optimist, added, "And think about the future students and scholars who will come after us. We've laid the groundwork for a whole new field of interspecies relations." John nodded, feeling a surge of hope for the future. "I hope they'll carry this legacy forward. Maybe one day, these exchanges will be as common as trade agreements and diplomatic missions." As they began to disperse, Zelnari approached John. I must return to my home world soon, but I want you to know that this project has changed us in ways I never anticipated. Your friendship has been a cherished part of my life here. John felt a lump in his throat as he embraced his friend. The feeling is mutual, Zelnari. Keep in touch, please. I will. And I hope to visit Earth one day, Zelnari replied with a smile. The farewells were bittersweet. As John prepared for his journey back to Earth, he reflected on the experiences shared and the friendships made. The council ship, once a foreign and intimidating place, now felt like a second home. As the stars outside the viewport whisked by, John realized that while his assignment had ended, the adventure of interstellar understanding was just beginning. Back on Earth, John's stories and reports would ignite curiosity and inspire further exchanges. The legacy of their work would live on, not just in scholarly articles or archives, but a continued push towards a more interconnected and empathetic galaxy.